Ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special guest tonight, a repeat guest on our show, the esoteric author and just generally awesome dude up from New York City, Micah Dank. Welcome to the show, Micah.
How's it going, man? It's good to be here.
Beautiful. We love having you on. Now, guys, if you're out there and you don't know who Micah is, he's on Twitter. He's got his own website. He is on Facebook, and he is the prolific author that you can find on Amazon with titles. In the beginning of a series, it's the Beneath the Veil series. It gets more than 4.5 stars. And then the book series has been ongoing now for about a year, and he's about to publish in just 3 days the final book in the series, which is called none other than The Final Type, which is pretty awesome stuff. He also has the amazing public group on Facebook called Into the Rabbit Hole, where you can interact with him personally. But my most impressive thing to show you here is MicahDank.com, his website, where you can contact him directly, check out his bio, and I believe buy signed copies of your book. Is that not correct?
That's right.
Cool. So do you have any, let's, first of all, how has the, where one thing we want to mention right off the bat is that the last time you and I did a podcast, there was one person, one woman in particular who super chatted us quite well. And then she said that your book series had changed her life. Now, I can believe this because Into the Rabbit Hole basically is a very easy way using fiction to enter the world, or the rabbit hole, as you call the series, of what is actually going on. And a lot of people that can't put the pieces together, when they read your series, it clicks and they start to put the pieces together themselves.
Right.
So, so we want to thank her. I don't remember who she was, but can you tell us some personal experiences about some of the people that have contacted you and talked to you about how your books have changed their lives?
I have a on my phone. I take screenshots of all this stuff and I keep it in a folder called like positive reviews, or I forget what I call it. But I just go through it sometimes, dude. People are going absolutely nuts over this stuff. People are going nuts. They're saying it's life-changing. They couldn't believe it. They couldn't believe half the stuff that was in it. That they started reading it and they'd have to stop and look things up every few minutes or so. It's just been wild, man. It's been absolutely insane. And now we're trying to get this turned into a TV series. So we're working on that.
Oh, that's nice. So, who is the with it with? Like, is it a cable show? Is it going to be a movie, or will it be a series?
We don't know yet. I think it should be a mini series, but we're pushing it. My publicist is pushing it to movie producers, TV producers in the UK, Canada, and the US. So that should be starting sometime in the beginning of next year.
Awesome. Well, tonight we wanted to talk about some more things esoteric, and your books certainly cover them. But tonight we want to talk about the lost gospels or the false gospels. Now, I think on our last podcast, you and I talked about this, and it includes books. Well, why don't you give us a little synopsis of some of the lost or hidden gospels, and maybe give us a real small synopsis on why those important books, like the book of Esther, have been left out of the current mainstream version of the Bible.
Right. So my contention is this, is that my work basically shows that the Bible and all the books that are outside of it, I've even done the Enuma Elish, the Epic of Gilgamesh, books of that nature, they're all astrotheological books. Okay, so some of the Gospels that I've worked on are Thomas, Mary Magdalene, Philip, Judas, the Gospels of all of them. And they're basically the Gnostic texts. They were left out because they do openly talk about astrology. Whereas the idea is that this is supposed to be hidden, but they openly talk about it. Enoch's another one that I talk about. I think we've done Enoch before. But the book of Enoch is basically another gospel that talks openly about astrology. It tells you about the watchers that taught the people different things, like astrology and the moon and the course of the stars and things of that nature. But if we can go into the Gospel of Thomas. Let me see here a second. I have to go over the 12 signs first. So I'm going to blaze through this real quick, just so everyone knows. So the first sign is Aquarius, which is represented by the man with the water pitcher. So it's a man pouring the water pitcher out over the side of heaven. So whenever you hear son of man, man, baptism, water pitcher, fountain, river, stream, pond, lake, things of that nature, waterly things, they're talking about Aquarius. Pisces is also talking about water things. Pisces is the sign of the two fish in the water. So whenever they're talking about Leviathan, or the fact that Jesus feeds the masses with two fish, that's a metaphor for the sun being in Pisces. Fish, water, for example, that's Pisces. Then Aries is the ram, and in Aries you have March 21st, which is the spring equinox. It's a 12-hour day and a 12-hour night. It's also, they celebrate the Passover. In Aries, every year, the Jewish people celebrate the Passover. That's when the sun passes over the equator. Now, it's metaphorized in the Bible as God passing over Egypt and bringing down judgment on anybody that didn't have the lamb's blood. Okay, the lamb's blood or the ram or Aries. So anytime you hear the word ram, lamb, shepherd, ram's horn, Jews, for example, the Jewish people are the people of Aries. We're the people of Aquarius now. They're the people of Aries, so they blow the ram's horn to the sky. Jesus was known as the Good Shepherd, the Lamb of God. These are just some names for him. Then Taurus is the bull, and when you look at the sky and you see Taurus during the season where it's supposed to be, you know that you need to put the plow on the bull so that you can plant the seeds so that you can harvest in Virgo and Libra. So that's basically when you're talking about the bull, the ox, the calf, the cow, for example, the cow being the female bull. They're talking about Taurus. Then Gemini is the twins, and that's the story of Castor and Pollux Troy, whose sister was Helen of Troy. It's the story of Achilles. So whenever they're talking about twins or brothers in the book, that's what they're talking about. They're talking about Gemini. Then Cancer is the crab, and the crab moves sideways. It's a sideways moving creature, just as the sun does. So starting on December 25th, the sun rises a degree on its axis, and then every day it rises an additional one until it hits its height, June 21st, which is the summer solstice. Then at that height, it's the longest day of the year. Then for 3 days, it stays at that height. And then on June 25th, it drops a degree, and then it continues to drop a degree every single day until it hits December 21st. When it hits December 21st, the sun doesn't even rise above the horizon. So they used to say God's sun was dead. And then it walks sideways like it did in June for 3 days. So they used to say God's sun was dead for 3 days. And then what happens is on December 25th, that's the day that all these gods are born, because the sun comes back to life. The sun is born again. So Cancer, the reason it's the crab is because it walks sideways, just like the sun walks sideways. So whenever you hear crab or beetle, for example, and the reason it's beetle is because the Egyptian zodiac, instead of it being a crab, it was a scarab. It was the beetle. Then Leo is the king. He's the lion. He's the king of the jungle. And the ruling planet of Leo is actually the sun. So whenever you're talking about lion, lioness, cub, you're talking about Leo. Virgo is the woman holding the wheat stalk. So before, when I said that you plant in Taurus, well, what happens is the virgins would cultivate the wheat in Virgo in order to make the bread for the year. So whenever you hear virgin, wheat, grain, seed, barley, things of that nature, they're talking about Virgo. Then Libra is the justice. It's the scales, it's the balance, it's the just one. And the reason it's justice is because it judges God's sun as it passes over the fall equinox and begins its descent into winter, into cold, into death. The Jewish people always celebrate their new year around the fall equinox. So anytime you hear lawly things, the reason being it's the justice is the judgment. You hear law, judge, justice, the just one, divorce, marriage, court, things of that nature. They're talking about Libra. Libra's also wine season. Okay, September, October, that's when you press the grapes into wine. So whenever you hear wine, vineyard, or wine press, they're talking about Libra. Libra's also olive oil season. You press the olives into the oil. That's how you get the oil and the wine. Then Scorpio is the scorpion, and he's known as the betrayer. And when a scorpion bites you, it leaves an imprint in your skin that looks like a pair of lips. It's why the mafia has the kiss of death, and it's why Jesus was betrayed by Judas with a kiss. So the sun is judged in Libra, and it's betrayed in Scorpio. Finally, in Sagittarius, this is the man with the bow and the arrow on the horse. This is where the bow and the arrow shoot the sun and inflict further punishment on the sun, killing it. Why does the sun die? Because it's December 21st. That's the day the sun dies. Okay, that's in Sagittarius. And then it can't rise any lower. It's dead. And then it stays at that height for 3 days. It's the dead of winter. So whenever you hear horse, bow and arrow, spear, horsemen, things of that nature, they're talking about Sagittarius. Then Capricorn is the goat, and the goat climbs the mountain. That's what the goat's job is to do. Just like the sun starts the climb of the mountain down in Capricorn at the bottom of the zodiac wheel when it goes up. So those are the 12 signs that I basically just ran through. And we could just jump right into the Gospels. So in the Gospel of Thomas, it first says, permit whoever seeks never to cease from seeking until he finds. Okay? If those who lead you... Oh, and there's another thing about these Gospels, too. You know how in the Bible you could be like, book 1, verse 3, line 5? They don't have that in these Gospels, so I'm just going to decode the phrases. Because I can't reference you to a specific page number and a section. So if those who lead you say God's kingdom is in heaven, then birds will fly there first. If they say it's in the sea, the fish will swim there first. So the sea is the metaphor for the water sign Pisces, and the fish that swim there are the 2 fish. Then happy is the lion that a man will eat, the lion will become a man. Cursed is the man whom the lion eats, for the lion will become a man. They're talking about ingesting an animal, and their components will become part of you, a part of you. However, in astrology, the lion sign is Leo, and the sign of the man is Aquarius. Those are opposing signs on the zodiac. Whenever you make these connections in these ancient books, there's a lot of talking about opposing signs and connecting signs. So in this particular case, Aquarius and Leo are opposing signs on the zodiac. That's how you knew this was done on purpose. Okay, because there is a pattern to this when you decode this stuff. Man is like a skilled angler who casts his net and draws it up full of fish. They're talking about the man sign Aquarius and the sign of the fish Pisces. Those are connecting signs. So before we had the opposing signs, and now we have the connecting signs. And then Jesus says, he who has ears wide open, let him hear. And, you know, the religious people will sit there and go, hear my message. But it's really trying to tell you that you need to look deeper and you need to make a bigger understanding with this. Then a sower went to sow. He filled his hand with seeds and scattered them on the field. This happens in Taurus. When you see the bull in the sky, you put the plow in the bull and till the land. We now have machinery that does it. Whereas we used to have the bull. That was the workhorse, basically, that used to plow the land. Jesus replied, I'm no longer your master because you've drunk from living water. You're enlivened by the bubbling source which I've caused to flow. Jesus being the sun throughout the zodiac. Christianity was in the time of Pisces. The living water is the sign of Aquarius, the man with the flowing water from the pitcher. So Jesus no longer rules Pisces. There's a new religion. He's in Aquarius. Now, I've made this point before, is that in the age of Taurus, that was the Egyptian period of time in history. Okay, they have plenty of hieroglyphs with the bull with their horns and the sun between it. They're telling you they worship the sun in Taurus. Then the Jewish people come along in the age of Aries with their ram's horn, the ram worship, the lamb's blood. And then basically the Christians come in the next time frame. They're the Pisces, the 2 fish. That's the time of the fish. You have the Jesus fish, which is the center of the Vesica Pisces. You have the Jesus feeds the masses with 2 fish. Incidentally, the center of the Vesica Pisces, the numerical number for it is 247 over 153. Now, in the Bible, Jesus is walking alongside the lake that the fishermen are in after he's resurrected. And he tells them to cast the net to the other side, and they catch 153 fish. See, they embedded these kind of metaphors in this numerical gematria and things like that nature for people to figure out. The astrology being the most prevalent. So Jesus replies, it is like a grain of mustard, smaller than other seeds, but when it falls on plowed ground, it grows a large stem and shelters from the bird. The seed comes from Virgo, the lady with the wheat stalk. When it falls on plowed ground or land tilled in Taurus, it grows. When the corn ripens, he comes in haste, sickle in hand, and reaps. He who has ears wide open, let him hear. So corn is typically harvested, especially in September, or Virgo, which is the lady with the wheat stalk. Okay, so this all just falls in line with this.
Right,
you can just use the decoding that I give you.
All right, so I've been following you, and I'm fully with you. What I'm going to show right now is the picture that I pulled up for this podcast, and it is a picture of a sad-looking Jesus getting kissed by Judas. Very famous a picture, and you said that kiss kiss of death that comes from the mafia is in Scorpio. Now, what does
Correct.
so we know about the changing of the zodiac as we move from the Gnostics to the Christians, etc. What does that Scorpio
Right.
representation mean in the Judas kiss? What was happening in Scorpio at the time that they're trying to tell us?
So what they're trying to say is basically this. They're trying to say that. So the idea behind astrotheology is Jesus is the sun.
Yeah.
And what I've done is I've given you the 12 signs and I've told you what their metaphor is and what position they play in the seasons and what they basically do. Now, the scorpion in the ancient times was known as the betrayer. Okay? The ancient Egyptians used to call it the betrayer too. This was just handed down to the Jewish people and the Christians as they wrote the New Testament. The Scorpio represents, it's basically the backbiter. Okay, so basically you think of the sun metaphorically. In Libra, it crosses. Remember how in spring it crosses over the equinox and it's celebrated as Passover?
Yeah.
The Passover. Well, in Libra, it crosses down over Libra. So it's basically beginning to be mourned because it's the judgment day. It's the fall equinox. And then it gets judged and then the days get colder and, the sun, it's almost like it's not working. And then what happens is it's judged in Libra, then it's betrayed in Scorpio because Scorpions are betrayers.
Yes.
And then it's killed in Sagittarius, the bow and the arrow. And then it's resurrected in Capricorn on December 25th.
So this is
So I didn't get to see that picture.
The point I want to make here, and I want to see if you can corroborate this, is this: that the texts, the Gnostic texts, the lost Gospels, all these texts that are using astrotheology are simply using a story, which is considered religious by many, to actually explain the astrology. That's it. It's an encoded
Correct.
way of writing
That's
a
all it is.
novel to tell us all what the astrology is. And the astrology is some of the oldest science on earth. Go ahead.
Diamond, think about this for a second. If we had to revert back, if there was like a nuclear explosion and we reverted back to like learning how to make fire, the wheel, cavemen, all that type of shit, okay? Finding God or finding Jesus would be so low on that list. We would have to, without calendars, without understanding our environment, to survive, we would have to look at the stars and we would have to make sense of it because it's a perfect calendar. The sun tells the hour of the day, depending on where you look at it. Okay, the moon tells the day of the month, okay, and the stars, the zodiac, tells the month of the year. It's a perfect calendar, and it would take thousands and thousands of years to figure that out. Once that's figured out and you knew that you didn't have to, because what would basically happen? I can look at my calendar and say it's September 27th, okay, so it's going to be a little chilly, but they didn't have like weather, they didn't have the ability to tell the weather back then. So they didn't know when it was going to snow. They didn't know when winter was going to come, and they had to know when to harvest because if they didn't plant in time, they weren't going to be able to reap anything at the end of the year. They weren't going to be able to store things at the end of the year, and they weren't going to be able to survive at the end of the year because they were going to die in the winter, So this is basically a metaphor. This is an encoded story about the sun as it travels through everything and what it means when the sun's in a certain month. And that's basically what it meant. That's what we would need to figure out.
Well, can you imagine the Magi or whoever figured out how to encode this into these stories, the people that are making them up initially, the conversations they had, because they knew what they were doing. All they're trying to do is preserve the most ancient science in a way that won't be bastardized, destroyed, or burned. So they're like, hey, let's all get together like the secret societies of today, and let's encode it into all these works of literature. Everyone's illiterate, so they're not going to know what we're doing. It's just our secret club that knows what we're doing. And then later, they can make up all their fairy tale stories about it, but it won't matter because as long as they think that that's the word of God, they will not change it. And the information, that encoded information, will pass forward.
Absolutely. And if you think about the stories of the Bible, it's every story. Jonah, he's in a whale for 3 days. He's basically dead for 3 days, and then he comes back to life. Samson and Delilah. In Hebrew, Samson means little son. Okay? Shamesh is the root of Samson. And Shamesh, if you know what the Shamash is, it's the Hanukkah candles. It's the candle that you light first to light all the other ones. It illuminates everything. It's the sun. If you talk about Delilah, Lila in Hebrew means night. So it's talking about the night overtaking the sun. Every story is just a variation of this.
Ooh.
That's what it basically is.
Okay, so
You know, and the
I have a great side combo we can do here on Shamesh, which is, according to you, the representation of the menorah, or is the Shamesh the candle that you light the menorah with?
candle that you light the menorah with. You light the first candle. You know how the menorah, it's like 8 candles and then there's
Yeah,
one in the front?
right.
The Shamesh or the Shema front candle. So
Okay.
you light that and then it lights everything else.
Well, we have some field evidence from our studies that the menorah itself is a plasma discharge feature that was seen in great antiquity, maybe during the Younger Dryas event. So, what would you would see for a period of time, let's say a whole generation, if you looked up to the north, towards the North Pole, is it something that looked just like a menorah glowing as an aurora. So instead of seeing an aurora, you would see a menorah up in the sky because that's how high energy the plasma was. And these are now recorded in petroglyphs in several locations. So clearly, this is going to be the hand of God creating this, but it's
Well, there's the
actually the
story. There's
sun.
the story.
It's the sun. Hold on.
Yeah.
I'm just going to give you the science and then you tell us the story. It's the sun that's creating the menorah and the people are witnessing it. So, what's the story?
It's basically the idea that the Jewish people. So the idea behind the menorah is that when they were in the temple, they only had enough oil to last one night, and it lasted for 8 nights. That was the miracle, supposedly. So basically, that lines up with what you're saying. Is they could have just looked up and noticed the menorah in the sky for 8 days.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it could have just lasted for 8 days. Wow, that's fantastic. Wow. Okay, so can we let's move on like to the book of Esther. I think where Jesus like has multiple partners and of course the church didn't want to hear about that. Do you have anything on that gospel?
I don't have anything on Esther, but I can do Mary Magdalene,
Oh,
Philip, or
I like that one.
Judas.
Yeah, let's do her.
Which
Mary
Mary
Magdalene.
Magdalene? It's not very long, but I do have some stuff on it. So the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. Mary questioned her master. At the end of an eon, will all matter be destroyed? That was her question.
Wow.
Each zodiac sign is considered a house. Okay, so it's considered a house. In the Bible, it says, in my father's house there are many mansions. Mansions is just another word for a house. Each zodiac is called a house. So the house of Aquarius, the house of Pisces. Each sign is also called an eon. Luke 22:10. He replied, as you enter the city, a man carrying a jar of water will meet you. Follow him to the house that he enters. The man carrying the jar of water is Aquarius. The disciples are asking Jesus where they're going to celebrate their next Passover. And he says, when Pisces ends, I'm going to be gone. Follow Aquarius. That's going to be the next house. Then Jesus greeted them by saying, peace be with you all. Take my peace into yourselves, but be watchful so no one leads you astray, claiming, look there, look here for the Son of Man. I tell you that the Son of Man is within you all. Seek him inside. Those who search diligently and earnestly shall surely find him. Again, they're talking about the sun being an Aquarius. Okay, that's the Son of Man. When the sun is in Pisces, he's known as the fisherman of men. He feeds the masses with 2 fish. When the sun is in Aries, the ram, he's known as the Lamb of God, or he's known as the Good Shepherd. When the sun is in Leo, he's known as the Lion of Judah. When the sun is in Virgo, the lady with the wheat stalk, he's called the bread of life, and he's called, he's born of a virgin. When the sun is in Libra, he's the just one because of the judgment, the justice. You know, and then he's betrayed in Scorpio. He dies in Sagittarius, and then he comes back to life in Capricorn. Okay, so that's basically the gospel of Mary Magdalene. But if I go to Philip, which is an interesting one.
All right,
Oh,
let's
wait
do
a minute. I got the gospel of Judas here.
okay. Let's do Judas and do you also have
He
Philip up there?
transformed. Yeah, I do. Well, give me
All
a
right.
sec. Let me get Philip.
Let's do Judas and Philip, and then I have a really good wrap-up question after we cover those two.
Okay, so the Gospel of Philip. If a fool harvests in winter, he'll tear out the good he has and be like a barren Sabbath. You don't harvest until you see the bull in the sky or Taurus. Okay? I'm sorry, you don't harvest until you see the lady with the wheat stalk telling you to harvest the wheat, or in Libra when they tell you to harvest the wine and the olives. Before Christ, there was no manna. Just as Eden had many fields to feed flocks, but no wheat to feed man. Manna in Hebrew is a word that means what's this? That's literally what it means. So basically, the ancients would be going around the desert and they'd point to the ground. They'd see a little, it was called a little round white thing. And they would say, what's this? Manna. And what they would do is they'd pick it up, they'd eat it, and they'd be able to talk to God. They're talking about hallucinogens. They're talking about psilocybin mushrooms, which is prevalent throughout the Bible. Okay? No wheat to feed man. They're still talking about before Christ. Christ comes from the virgin Virgo. Before he came, the Son of God goes into Virgo. There's no wheat to feed man. When he came to his disciples in splendid glory on the Mount of Olives, he wasn't small. He became great and made his disciples great so they could see him in his greatness. On that day, he said in gratitude, "You who have united perfect light with unite us with the angels as well. Don't scorn the Lamb. Without him, it is impossible to know the King. No one may visit the King without robes of light." So olives are in Libra. That's the Mount of Olives. The Lamb is in Aries. They're talking about don't scorn the lambs. Okay, Libra and Aries are opposing signs, as I mentioned before to you on the zodiac wheel. Three walked with Christ. Mary, his mother, her sister, also Mary, and Mary Magdalene. All three were called Mary. Okay, have you ever seen the Virgo glyph before?
No, what does it look like?
It's basically an M with a Jesus fish attached to it. That's the glyph for Virgo. It's telling you Mary and the Jesus fish. Okay? Basically, in the Egyptian times, this comes from Isis Mary. It's always Isis Meri. Okay? So basically, all the ancient gods, mothers, started with an M. So that's why the woman sign in the zodiac is basically an M with the Jesus fish on it. Okay? The apostles said to the disciples, "May our sacrifices contain salt." They called Sophia, the divine wisdom, salt. Without the savor of salt, no sacrifice will be acceptable. So we get the word salary from salt because back in the ancient days, before humanity knew refrigeration, they were paid in salt because that's what preserved the meat. So you'd go out and you'd kill a big-ass ox, and then, you'd eat whatever you could, and then basically the meat would go bad. You'd have to feed it to the animals. Or when you started getting paid in salt, you were able to preserve that for a little before refrigeration, before freezing. Lot's wife turns into a pillar of salt when she leaves Sodom and Gomorrah. She turns around. Basically, she looked back at the depravity of Sodom and Gomorrah and turned into salt. Now, salt was the form of money. That was the highest currency back then. So what they're basically saying is it would be like leaving Las Vegas with all the debauchery, the hookers, the gambling, everything. You turning around at McCarran Airport to give it one more look, and you turning into a pile of gold coins. That's basically what the Bible is trying to share. Okay? Man plows his field with the aid of the ox, and from tame beasts he's fed. The perfect man plows through his subdued powers, preparing for all to come into being. Okay? They're literally talking about Taurus. That's when you plow. The Holy Spirit shepherds us and rules all powers, tame, wild, and unique. He hedges us so we cannot stray. The shepherd is in Aries, the lamb, the good shepherd. The previous passage was talking about Taurus. This one's about Aries. Those are connecting signs in the zodiac. But the worldly man sees the sun without being a sun, the same with heaven and earth. Just openly talking about the sun. The bridal chamber is not fit for beasts and loose women. It is for free men and the virginal. So free men, that is Virgo, the virgin, the lady with the wheat stalk. Nor can you see reflected light without a mirror or water, so it is right to baptize in light and water. The light is the oil. They're talking about the sun. Baptize in light and water. Baptism comes from Aquarius, the man with the water pitcher pouring the water out. The light is the oil, okay? Christ is the sun, okay? Christ is a title. It's not a name. His name was not Jesus Christ, okay? Christ is a title, okay? In Greek, it means oil, Before you're saying, oh, yeah, no, everybody used to speak in Hebrew. Yes, everybody used to speak in Hebrew back in that time. The Bible was written in Hebrew. However, what you didn't know is that during that time, the Greeks were also prevalent, and anyone who was sophisticated spoke Greek. Okay? They spoke and they philosophized, they intellectualized in Greek, even though they spoke Hebrew. The true priest is totally holy, for he has consecrated the bread by enlivening the water of baptism. The bread is Virgo with the wheat stalk. The water of baptism is Aquarius. If you connect the firmaments between Aquarius and Pisces and Leo and Virgo, those are opposing signs. The Good Samaritan gave wine and oil to the weak man. Well, wine and oil come from Libra. Okay, these are, okay, men enjoy sex with a woman, the stallion with a mare, the bull with a cow. That's Aquarius and Virgo. That's Sagittarius, the stallion with a mare. That's a Sagittarius, that's a horse. And the bull with the cow is Taurus. You know? And then we have the Gospel of Judas. You want to jump in?
No, let's save it for later because I have some amazing things I want.
We can't hear you.
Let me, yeah, it says I'm muted, but let me unmute here. Hello, can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yeah. We're
All
good.
right.
Yeah, we're good.
All right. So, couple things. In a lot of my studies, I have determined that Christianity came from the Gnostic Christians, and the Gnostic Christians came from a mushroom cult. And you mentioned about 5 minutes ago about hallucinogenic mushrooms in reference to the mana. So can we just let's go over the mana statement and let's just extrapolate a little on the psychedelics.
So mana basically means what's this? Okay? And in the Bible, they're fed with mana. That's what keeps them alive, keeps their spirit alive. They would go and they would see, it would be a little round, it was called a little round white thing on the floor. They would just see this little thing and go, mana, what's this? They would eat it and then they would hallucinate. They would speak to God. It was a mushroom trip.
Beautiful.
And you're absolutely right about the mushroom cults. You got to understand too, is before 325 AD, before 325 AD, before Constantine united everybody under literal Christianity, the original Christians, for about that 325-year period, were called Helionostics. That was the name for them. And Helios in Greek means sun, and Gnosis means to know. They were sun worshippers. They were open sun worshippers. So yes, they do come from that. Literal Christianity is the antithesis to what it was truly supposed to be.
Yeah.
Okay, the ancients that wrote these books never would have expected people to believe these literally.
No, and I think that the Helio-Gnostics wrote almost all of the Gospels almost as a ruse because they knew when people read the text, if they had the ability to, because most people couldn't read, they would be interesting enough that you would want to continue to read the story. But if you had very little intellectual concept, you wouldn't be able to find the hidden meaning. And that is the lost schools. And so I think what we're actually doing as you as a novelist and me as a scientist coming together, we're literally putting the pieces together and making a really concise picture of what was going on back then. But we're trying to figure out why it's being used against us. And here, this is my final question, because I have to get on to the next interview. But answer me this, Micha. If we know all this, and you and I know all this simply by researching the information or reading the documents, what does the Roman Catholic Church and the Vatican know? Do they know what we're positing here? That the Helio-Gnostics were simply embedding astrotheology into these stories? And are they hiding it from the public to make money? Go ahead.
For starters, I believe that they burnt down the Library of Alexandria for this exact reason. I believe that they did. 100%.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to read you Roman Catholic Catechism. Do you know what the catechisms are?
Yeah, I'm Roman Catholic, bro. I unsubscribed at 13 when I got beaten by a priest.
I didn't know that. I'm sorry to hear that. So I'm going to read you the Roman Catholic Catechism 2116. These are for people who don't know what the catechisms are. It's basically like how we have a Declaration of Independence and we have like amendments to it. These are basically amendments. These are like additional things that you need to keep in track, right? Would you say that's a pretty good?
Yeah, they're
That's
amendments to
basically
the
what they are.
original law.
Roman Catholic. Roman Catholic Catechism 2116. All forms of divination are to be rejected. Recourse to Satan or demons, conjuring up the dead, or other practices falsely supposed to unveil the future. Consulting horoscopes, astrology, palm reading, interpretation of omens and lots, the phenomena of clairvoyance, and recourse to mediums, all conceal a desire for power over time, history, and in the last analysis, other human beings, as well as a wish to conciliate hidden powers. They contradict the honor, respect, and loving fear that we owe to God alone. So that's the Roman Catholic Catechism. There's so obvious to people who understand this. There's so obvious astrology in the Bible. And you're asking me if the Jesuit Pope right now knows? Of course they do. Of course they do at the top. You're telling me that the Jesuits that just celebrated their birthday, they don't know what's going on? Absolutely at the top. Maybe not the priests at the bottom level, but absolutely. And in the Vatican archives, I'm just waiting for those to get overrun.
Oh my God, what a wonderful podcast. So what we just determined tonight in less than 40 minutes is that the Vatican, well, the Roman Catholic Church in general, has gone to extraordinary lengths to prevent you from actually knowing what the Bible means because it's against their religion, quote unquote. And I bet you have to do penance if you think that this has to do with astrotheology, when anyone with half a brain that looks into this for half an hour will figure out exactly what you and I are saying. Final words, Micah Dank. And let's
It's
do this
incredible
again.
how.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we'll definitely do this again. We can do either the Enuma Elish or we could do the Epic of Gilgamesh. These are not even biblical texts and they're still written in the same format. I think that would be interesting to get into.
Yeah, let's do it.
But basically what I would say is if people just YouTube me, because I'm all over the place, and just watch my videos, because I debunk all this stuff. Or you can reach out to me on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram if you're interested in the signed copies of the books. Even if you're just interested in learning more about this stuff, I'll send you my best podcast links that I've done with all these different topics, and you'll be astounded. You'll be astounded how this is just the tip of the iceberg. This does not even constitute like a real study tonight. This is just like an introduction to it. It is everywhere. That's all the Bible is all the stories are basically that.
Well, that's why we're here.
The four horsemen.
Yeah. The four horsemen?
You have the four horsemen. The four horsemen. Yeah, the four horsemen of the apocalypse. Well, what is a horseman? That's Sagittarius. It's the man with the bow and the arrow on the horse. Okay, what happens in Sagittarius? The sun dies. Okay? There's four horsemen. There's four gospels where Jesus dies. Okay, that's why that's there. It's all written the same way. These are all the same stories.
Holy macaroni. Always a pleasure, Micah Dank. Go check out Micah Dank's new book in just 3 days. And if you want to get close and personal to Micah Dank, check out his website, micahdank.com, Into the Rabbit Hole. He is over here at Facebook, where he responds to you personally on his Into the Rabbit Hole series. He's on Twitter at The Real Mr. Dank. Real Mr. Dank. And he follows us. That's pretty awesome. Awesome podcast tonight. And let's get into Gilgamesh. I'd like to do that. And let's talk about some of these ancient stories and how they relate to astrotheology. How's that sound?
Absolutely. Sounds great.
Right. Yeah. We love you, Micah. Check out Micah Dank and be safe. And that was a boom to knowledge in the astrotheological type.